join, can you put in the chat and remind them that we are recording the meeting so that they're aware of it? I think I might not mute everybody in the beginning, but if there's a lot of background noise, then maybe we'll have to play around with muting everybody, and then you would raise your hand to speak. But let's just try it. For now, I'll go through the presentation. We can answer questions, have an open discussion. But if there's a lot of background noise, like I said, then we'll probably go to muting and using the raising the hand. And we turned off our video, so I think we are good. Let me just do a quick roll call. And if I forgot anybody's names or skipped by accident, please just let me know. So the first one would be Jenna Goodman Campbell. And I believe she's going to be a little bit late. Dave Johnson.
I'm here.
Oh, good. Lisa Muschel.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Scott Winters. You guys saw him?
Yep, I'm
okay. Kathy Austin.
Yes, I'm here.
Sam Frigas. I don't think she was able to make it. Audrey Allen.
Here.
Okay. Colin. Jesse Russell.
Here.
Okay. Jeff Harris. Okay. Karna. Matt Gillette.
Here.
Hi, Matt. It's been a while. Moe Nibble. Okay. Alex. I see him on there. Okay, so I think he is going to be attending. Ryan Jennings. Not here yet. Bill Bernardi.
Here.
Hi, Bill. Sarah Santa.
Here.
And Mike Walker.
Here.
Okay, thank you for doing that for me. So today, let me share my PowerPoint. That's annoying. Hold on. Is that sharing?
No.
No.
Yeah, Pauline.
Okay.
If you want to try to send it to me, I could try also.
Okay, I might do that because I had it working obviously before this started. I'll send it to you right now, Lynn.
Apologies, you guys. We had Teams so well dialed. It was like super easy, knock on wood, to make the switch. And then they did some updates recently. Like it kind of blew up everybody's processes. So thanks for hanging in here with us as we're working through it.
I despise updates. It's hard enough to figure it out the first time, let alone dealing with updates. Jeez.
Okay, I got it, Pauline. So I'm going to try to share here in 1 second.
Pauline?
Oh, I think I got it, Lynn.
Oh, yeah.
Pauline?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you send me the credentials again? I've lost them somehow.
The meeting invite?
Yes,
Okay.
it's Dave Johnson.
Pauline, you want me to do it?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Lynn.
Okay. I'll give it a try.
Okay, so are we seeing my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
fantastic.
We're seeing it in speaker mode. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Okay. So the first thing that we're going to go over today is basically the draft Oregon revised statutes. And these are draft. The LCDC, the commission is going to be holding a public hearing to review and adopt these OARs. Their first public hearing is September 25th. But I thought to just get us all started and become familiar with the draft OARs and the model code would be helpful before we start looking at updating our Bend development code. And so the draft OARs are going to help us with duplexes, triplexes, cottage clusters, townhomes, and quadplexes. So again, these are all draft. They're subject to change. And I'll go through and I'll highlight some areas where I think there might be some tweaking to the language. So their first public hearing is September 25th, and then they'll hold a final public hearing and adopt the new rules during their November 12th and 13th meeting. So we are a little bit ahead of the game, but like I said, I think it'd be good to just start going through this, familiarize ourselves with it, and then it will help us as we jump into drafting the Bend Development Code amendments. So basically, the OARs are from the draft OARs that we're reviewing in the model code are required as part of the new House Bill 2001 that was passed in 2019. And I think a lot of us are familiar with that bill, but for those of us that aren't, I just want to remind people that the bill requires duplexes to be allowed on each lot or parcel that's zoned for residential use. So basically, wherever you allow a single family dwelling unit, you have to allow a duplex. And then the second part of the city, which applies also to our city because we're considered a large city, which is a population 25,000 people or more, is that we also have to allow triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, and townhomes in areas zoned for residential use. So it's a little bit different in the bill. Duplexes have to be allowed on a lot or parcel, whereas triplexes, quads, cottages, and townhomes have to be allowed in areas zoned for residential use. And the state worked with several committees and has come up with a way to define what in areas means. And we'll go through that today. These draft rules and model code, they establish standards for the siting and design of these types of housing that we have to comply with within the city of Bend, and they have to be clear and objective. These don't apply to our high density residential zone because we don't allow single family detached dwellings in there. But on a separate note, our high density residential zone already allows duplexes, triplexes, townhomes. So we'll make sure whatever we do, that it's just as permissive in the high density residential district. So as we start diving into this, and I only picked out a handful of the definitions that I thought were helpful, but in the attachment to the meeting invite, which includes the entire package of the OARs, there's a number of definitions that are included. So I encourage you to go through those and familiarize yourselves with all the definitions. But for our discussion today, I thought it would be good just to highlight the ones that we'll be focusing on. So cottage cluster it's going to be a little confusing because in our code today, we have what is called a cottage housing developments. This is going to be a different type of cottage development, and it will be called cottage cluster. It means a grouping of no fewer than 4 detached dwelling units per acre. And they actually put in the definition a size restriction, which is odd, but it's in there, so we have to comply with it. Basically says that the footprint can be has to be less than 900 square feet, and that the units may be located on a single lot or parcel, or that they can be on one large parcel, and that they would include a common courtyard. Detached single family dwelling, which is similar to what we define today, is basically a detached structure on a lot or parcel comprised of one unit, either site built or it can be a manufactured dwelling. A duplex is very similar to what we provide today in our development code. Is basically 2 attached units, and you can require them to be attached or detached. This master plan community definition is important because cities and counties are trying to figure out how this bill affects our existing master plans that we have today, as well as master plans that will be approved after January 1st of 2021. Master plans in our city today are typically 20 acres or larger, and we already require a mix of housing types. So we're watching this one closely, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think this definition, as well as the requirements for master plan, is going to be amended a little bit so that it's easier to understand and that it works for more of the cities. But basically, it defines a master plan as 20 acres in size or greater, which is how the city of Bend defines it as well, or requires a master plan, and that it could be inside city limits or adjacent to your urban growth boundary. So the other one, middle housing, is just going to be used throughout this. And again, that means the duplexes, triplexes, quads, cottages, and townhouses. A new one for the city of Bend will be quadplexes, which is 4 attached or detached dwelling units on a lot. And then townhouse is already defined in our code. It's 2 units, could be more than 2 units, and they share at least 1 common wall. Triplex, very similar to what's in our code today. It's 3 units on a lot, and they can be attached or detached. And given that I am sharing my screen, I can't tell if anybody has questions on the definitions. Again, this is a little bit odd because the state is telling us how we're going to define this, so we don't have a lot of wiggle room to change anything. But if you have questions, I can help answer them.
I'm sorry, I can't see your sharing document. Where are we in the code the draft OAR?
So we just went through some definitions, and that is on page 3. And we're moving on to what would be the ORS that ends in 0120. So it's the siding standards for duplexes. And that is on page 6.
And then Pauline, it looks like Kathy has a question and Bill Bernardi.
Okay. So Kathy?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I went through the agenda item 7 attachment B, and so my notes were related to that, and I apologize.
Oh, okay.
But it in several instances it referred to discretionary standards under ORS 197.307, and I was wondering, is that something that we have or not?
Okay, hold on 1 second. I believe I know that one.
Yeah, and it was on page 15, and it because of the clear the defined standards, and then it said, but you can use this, and so I thought I'd ask the question now rather than later.
And I think it comes up in my presentation, Kathy, but
okay.
And don't hold me to this, but if I remember correctly, so a city is supposed to have clear and objective standards for needed housing, which is basically all types of needed housing. A city can also have a different path for approving needed housing that is discretionary, but the developer has to have the option of having a clear and objective path. So you have to have the clear and objective path. And then on top of that, if you want to like create some type 2 process that might be a little more flexible, but it adds some discretion in, a city can do that as long as they have the clear and objective path as well.
Okay, well, that's great because, having that flexibility to be creative is really critical with all these infill parcels. And so I just wanted to make sure we had that as a path. So that was my only question. I'll take down my hand.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
And then I think, was it Bill that had a question?
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple of times that these are rules that the city will need to follow, but really this is a draft and the state is still in the process of soliciting input. Isn't that correct? So shouldn't today's meeting really be thought of as an opportunity to identify feedback that we want to provide to the state?
So I've already worked on a committee that provided technical assistance. Lynn McConnell, who's on the phone call right now, is on the rule-making advisory committee. It's called the RAC. And we've been meeting for over, 6 to 9 months, drafting these regulations. This meeting is to go over what is being proposed and what we'll likely have to implement. If you, as a member of the public, would like to provide public comment, I can give you the contacts for the DLCD staff, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, where you can provide public input on that. But we've been working internally with staff and with all the other RAC and TAC members with the state on drafting these rules. So it would be kind of odd for Lynn and I to then come back and propose changes on committees that we were a part of.
No, that's okay. So if you could send out the contact information, maybe to the whole group, that would be appreciated.
Yes, I definitely can. And 2 new emails came out today from DLCD with some more detail on the rulemaking and the public hearings. And I will forward that email on to everybody that is part of the phone call today.
Oh, God.
Was there anybody else? Okay. I am just going to make sure no one is waiting in the lobby. Okay, nope, no one is. All right, let me get my screen hopefully back up. Do we see my screen?
We can. And Dave, if you can mute, that would be great. Thank you. Perfect.
Okay. Okay. And we can see the screen. Okay. And from current slide. Okay. So duplex siting standards, these have already been adopted for medium-sized cities, and medium-sized cities is between 10 and 25,000 in population. What they went ahead and did for the large cities, which is 25,000 or greater, is propose the same identical adopted standards for the medium. These are subject to change because the large cities haven't been through the public hearing process, but for now, they are proposing identical standards that were adopted for the medium cities. And what it says, and which is right out of the House bill, and we've already gone over it, is that you can't, you have to allow a duplex on the same, wherever a single family dwelling unit is allowed, which basically means that, for example, in our standard density residential district or the RS district, that if we allow a single family home on a 4,000 square foot lot, we have to allow a duplex on that same size lot. They are exempting duplexes from density, which is consistent with how our code is right now. We exempt duplexes and triplexes from density because the lot sizes don't match the, don't align with the density requirements. The setbacks can be no different than what we apply to our single family detached dwellings. So basically, I'm going to keep using our standard density residential district. They require 5-foot side and rear setbacks, 10 for the front setback for the livable or habitable space, and 20 for the garage. So we would just mirror that, which we already do today for duplexes. And the height has to be the same as single family, which we do today. This would be a change here is the parking requirements. Basically, the state is saying no more than a total of 2 off-street parking spaces for a duplex. I believe ours today is based off bedrooms, so it will probably amount to a little less parking. It still allows the city to provide a credit for on-street parking, which the city today allows up to 50% to be counted on site. And then if you're going to apply any lot coverage or floor area ratio requirements, it has to be what we apply to our single family dwelling units. And this one we'll have to look at a little bit. We do have a floor area ratio requirement for certain single family detached dwelling units, depending on where they're located. Whether or not we continue doing that will be probably a question for this group. We do have lot coverage requirements for single family duplexes, triplexes today. So we'll review our current lot coverage requirements and make sure that whatever we have today is in compliance with what gets adopted. Was there any questions on that one, Lynn?
Doesn't appear to be. So just a reminder for everybody, you can raise your hand down at the bottom or top toolbar, whatever you're seeing, and we'll get called on.
Okay. And Lynn, cut me off. If you see someone raise their hand, I don't mind.
Okay.
So we today worked basically 2 years ago on design standards for duplexes and triplexes, and they've been working well. The state has actually mirrored, I think, some of our design standards and have allowed some other types of design standards. However, for a duplex, it's my understanding that if you don't apply design standards to your single family detached dwelling units, you cannot require design standards for duplexes. And today in Bend, we don't apply any design standards to single family detached dwelling units. So it's my understanding then that we cannot apply any design standards to duplexes. So what's in our code today that has been working fine, from what I understand anyways, will probably have to be deleted if this gets adopted, and there won't be any design standards for duplexes.
Oh, gee.
So that basically covers duplexes. The meeting that we're going to have on September 30th is going to dive into the draft model code requirements, which does include some design standards. Again, for duplexes, we probably can't use any of them, but as we move through talking about the triplexes, quads, townhomes, and cottage clusters, you'll notice what we're going to talk about is basically siting standards. So, you know, like density, lot sizes, setbacks, things like that, but it won't include any design standards. We're going to talk about design standards at our next meeting, and that's on September 30th. So now we're going to talk about the triplexes, quads, townhomes, and cottage clusters. And remember, these have to be allowed in areas zoned for residential uses. A city can look at certain areas that may not work for this type of middle housing. And according to this section in ORS, you can look at goal protected lands, which the city really doesn't have any. We can look at infrastructure constrained lands. I have a meeting coming up with staff to look into see if the city of Bend has any infrastructure constrained lands. And basically infrastructure constrained lands, I don't think I provided that definition, but it's worth mentioning. So infrastructure constrained lands means lands where it's not feasible to provide acceptable water, sewer, storm drainage, or transportation to the new types of housing, where the local government is not able to correct the infrastructure limitations by utilizing the process outlined in there's 2 OAR sections due to cost, jurisdictional, or other limitations, and which cannot be remedied by future redevelopment of middle housing on the subject lot or parcel. So we have a meeting, I believe it's at the end of next week, with staff and with our engineering department to look in to see if we have any infrastructure constrained lands. If we do, then we might be able to look at limiting this type of middle housing in those particular areas. But first we have to even see if we have any of those types of lands. And then the other one is you may limit it in areas zoned that have a master plan on them. And like I said, there's definitely still some discussions going on about this language, particularly A and B. There's some conflicting language in here. It's also somewhat difficult to understand what it means because it says you can provide limitations. However, if you go to A, it says that you may not limit. So there's a conflict right there. So staff is asking for clarity on this particular topic from the state. But from what we, at a high level, understand this to mean that we do have master plan communities, and what they will be subject to if they were approved after the January 1st, 2021, is that they may not limit the development of middle housing on any lands, but what they could limit is the overall net residential density of 15 dwelling units per acre. So we're asking for clarity on that. And we're also, just so you're aware, asking why they're using net residential density, where a lot of cities, and it's much easier to calculate, use gross density. So there might be a change there, but we'll see. And then the second one is B. Again, if you have a master plan and it was approved before January 1st, 2021, you may limit the middle housing, except for single family detached and duplexes. And you have to provide at least 8 dwelling units per acre in those areas. I think the city is probably okay with complying with these the way our master plans have been approved, because we do require a mix of housing types and densities with our master plans, but we just need some clarity on it, and we are going to ask the state for clarity, as are other cities and counties. Any questions on that? Okay, I'm gonna move on then. So the section of the OARs 205 is the applicability of middle housing. Basically, you can allow, you have to allow triplexes, quads, townhomes, and cottage clusters, including conversion, which we'll go through, in areas zoned for residential use, which we realize. There is this alternative where you can apply separate minimum lot size and maximum density provisions than what is required in the OARs that we're going to go over here in a minute, and in the model code. This is a question, and I'm taking 3 topics to our, I believe, City Council, I think it's the Building Community Subcommittee, to get some high-level council direction on. And one is going to be this, and you'll see there's 2 ways you can look at minimum lot sizes. One is in this section, and one is just very straightforward, which it's kind of odd how they organize these OARs, that this came first and the other one came second, but we'll go through it. So one option for the cities to consider is if you want to apply a different lot size and maximum density provisions than what the OARs require, you would have to allow triplexes on at least 80% of the lots, quadplexes on 70%, townhomes on 60%, and cottage clusters on 50%. And then you'd have to meet this criteria, which basically says the middle housing type is permitted use on the lot or parcel under the same administrative process as a single family detached dwelling, which it would be. Lot or parcel has sufficient square footage to allow middle housing types within the applicable minimum lot size requirement. So basically, whatever lot size the city proposes, you have to make sure you can allow sufficient square footage to have those structures built, and that the maximum net or gross densities do not prohibit the development of middle housing, and that the applicable siting and design standards do not individually or cumulatively cause unreasonable cost or delay of that housing type. So you'd have to show the state where you're going to allow the triplexes, quads, townhomes, cottage clusters to meet those percentages, and you'd have to show the state how you are complying with that criteria. And you would have to ensure the equitable distribution of the housing by at least one middle housing type other than duplexes has to be allowed on 75% of all residential lots or parcels within each census block group within a large city. So we're going to take this to City Council, see if they're interested in this alternative path. If they are, then we would work with the stakeholder group on defining it. But first, I need some direction from the council on this one. Okay, moving. I'll just keep going unless I hear.
Yeah, it looks like Bill has a question again.
Okay, let me go back.
Yeah, Pauline, why would anyone want to do this? It seems really geeky and burdensome.
Well, I'm happy to hear that, because it seems to me like a lot of work when you see what the lot sizes are. It's just very straightforward, very clear and objective. A developer will know what they can and can't do versus this. But because there is options provided in the OARs, I do feel it's a good idea to bring it to the council subcommittee so there's aware that we have options. My guess is we'll probably go with the straightforward lot parcel sizes, similar to what we did 2 years ago for duplexes and triplexes.
Okay.
So this is oddly written, but it's in there, so I thought we'd go over it. Basically, it's saying that when a city updates their code and they want to, and they have to provide duplexes, tris, quads, townhomes, and cottages, that you can actually allow more units on the site if you want to. So basically, duplex, you can allow more than 2 units on a lot or parcel, including any ADUs. Same for tris and quads, you can allow more than 4. Townhomes, this seems to me more of a standard, but what it is saying is you have to require at least 2 attached units, which makes sense because that defines a townhome, which is 2 attached units. And you must allow up to 4 attached townhouse units. I guess some cities maybe say you can only have 3, but in this case, the state is saying you have to at least allow up to 4 attached townhouse units. And a city can allow more if they want to. Cottage cluster. This one, I think some of the cities and the that were part of the RAC are going to ask for clarity on this, because the definition, as you may recall, is a cottage cluster is at least 4 units. In this case, it's saying it has to allow at least 5. So I think there's some conflict here. I'm not quite sure what A and B mean, and I've been working with the planning department in Beaverton and some other cities, and we're trying to get clarity on this one because it doesn't align with the definition. So more to come on the cottage clusters. Okay, this is basically just saying that cities may regulate siting and design, and it has to be clear and objective, and it can't discourage the development of middle housing through unreasonable cost or delays. And that's the nice thing about the draft model code, is that they provide siting and design requirements that they feel are clear and objective, which they are, and that they also agree that they don't discourage the development of middle housing through unreasonable cost or delays. So if a city chooses to use what's in the draft design guidelines, you're safe to say that you're going to comply with these 2 requirements, because if the state adopts everything that's in there, then you would be in compliance. One of the siting and design standards was the siting and design standards that do not individually or cumulatively discourage the development of middle housing through.
Okay. We have a question when you're ready.
Okay, let's do the question.
Just me again. I'm sorry to harp on this, but we would be allowed to do an alternative discretionary standard if we wanted to in this, correct?
Yes, we definitely could.
Okay, thank you.
That's my understanding, and I might even be in this section under F, alternative siting or design standards. No, it's a different one, but there is a section, Kathy, that is referenced where we can do like a type 2. So basically, because one of the requirements that we're going to review is that we have to treat and process, triplexes and quads, just like we process a single family dwelling unit, which is what we call a type 1 minimum development standards review. It's very clear and objective. Today, we do the type 1 minimum development standards review for single family dwelling units, duplexes, and townhouses, and ADUs. The only thing we didn't do currently is triplexes. We process that as a type 2 under site plan review, and we don't have quads. If we had quads, it would be a type 2. What this is going to require is that any of those type 2 processes get reviewed just like a single family dwelling unit, so it'll be a type 1 process. And what Kathy's asking is, that's great, we can have the type 1 process. It's very easy for a developer to know what they need to do, but maybe we come up with a type 2 discretionary process, which adds cost and time to the application, but it does also provide them with some flexibility to do something different. And we'd have to come up with whatever that may be, but it is within, I think, our realm to do that. Okay. So then, okay, I think this is it, Kathy. So section 197.3074 gives the city the ability to have an approval process that is discretionary as long as you have the clear and objective process. And that's what this section's saying. You have to treat them just like single family dwelling units. As long as you do that, then you can also adopt alternative approval process. So it's in that third bullet that gives the city the ability to do that.
Pauline, what's an example of something that would not be clear and objective, as referred to in that last bullet?
That's a good question, because right now everything we have is clear and objective. I'm trying to think. I mean, height, setbacks, lot coverage, that's all clear and objective. In our code today, which we're not going to keep, but there are some design standards, and we've changed a lot of them, but let's say you had some design standards under the type 1, and they're easy to meet, very clear and objective. You can create a type 2 process that gives them more flexibility to do a different type of design. So let's say there's a requirement for a certain roof pitch for a triplex or something, and they want to do something different. You can bump them up to a type 2 discretionary process. It's probably not the best example, but it's something that's in the code today.
So it would be an alternative path.
Yes.
Not a required path.
No, it would be an alternative. The developer would have two options if we went this route. First option is clear and objective. You know what size lot, you know the setbacks, you know the height, you know your lot coverage, potentially floor area ratio, and then the developer may want to do something different, and then they would have the discretionary path. And I don't know what that would look like, but it would be something doable.
Pauline, let me just volunteer what it would be if you had an unusual shaped parcel, or you had a rock outcropping or heritage trees or whatever that make you design setbacks in a different way. So it just gives you flexibility to deal with some of these odd infill parcels, if that is helpful in visualizing why you would want to do something alternative.
Yeah, unfortunately, Kathy, we do have, I believe it's a type, we have A, B, and C variances. I believe there are some ways to deal with rock outcroppings and trees, but we could, that's a similar idea. Yes.
And then we have one other question out there.
Uh-huh.
Hi, this is Mike Walker. I'm looking at a submittal from Mike Reeder to the DLCD. He is an attorney. And his answer to the question the bill had asked was, I argue that any expense, regardless of the actual dollar amount, for a study such as traffic study, impact study, and such, that serves no purpose is a problem. So if that's any help, it's there in the record. I think this was probably meeting 7.
And what, Mike, would that pertain to in this discussion?
The question the bill had, what qualifies as clear and objective? I'm just telling you, there's a land use attorney. He actually spoke in favor of the Evergreen project here in Bend, was that a year and a half ago? So this guy, this memo, one-page memo, you might want to just look it up, Pauline. I'm just pointing it out. He probably knows what he's talking about. The date on his memo is April 12th. It's in the package that was 164 pages. I think
to the state? I'm just not following, Mike. Why don't you send it to me, and then I can take a look to see how that pertains to duplexes and triplexes.
Give you some help that there was a land use attorney who tried to give you the group an input.
Okay, thank you. Was there any other questions or comments? Okay, so we'll go on to, this is the clear and objective path for lot sizes for triplexes and quads. The triplex, basically, given that if your single family dwelling unit's allowed on a lot that is less than 5,000 square feet, then your triplex has to be allowed on a 5,000 square foot lot. A city can go smaller. What we allow today, our single family detached dwelling in the RS is 4,000 square feet. So the triplex then would be on a 5,000 square foot in the RS. The RM district does not have a lot size for triplexes today, so I assume that we would just continue with that for the medium density. As for our low density residential district, because the lot sizes for a single family dwelling unit are greater than 5,000 square feet, then you have to allow a triplex on the same size lot as the single family dwelling unit, which is 10,000 square feet. So in short, in the RS, if this all gets adopted the way it's proposed, a single family would be on a 4,000 square foot lot in the RS. A triplex would be on a 5,000 square foot lot in the RS. And then in the low density residential district, a single family and a triplex would have to be allowed, and a duplex, on a 10,000 square foot lot. And then quadplexes, they use similar numbers. If the single family dwelling unit is on a lot 7,000 square feet or less, then the minimum lot size for a fourplex is 7,000. So again, in the RS, because the single family is allowed on a 4,000, which is less than the 7, you have to allow a quadplex on a 7,000 square foot lot. And then in the RL, it would be the 10,000 square foot lot. So basically in the low density residential district, everything has to be allowed as proposed on a 10,000 square foot lot. And I'll double check, all of us together will double check all these numbers, but that was my reading of it so far. The density, when cities apply maximum density, which the city of Bend does, for example, in the standard density residential district, the maximum density is 7.3 units to the acre. According to these draft OARs and model codes, you cannot apply a maximum density. And you can't, because if you're going to allow a quadplex on a 7,000 square foot lot, you're not going to comply with density. It's going to exceed it. So you have to basically exempt the duplexes, triplexes, basically exempt everything from density is what it's saying. Setbacks have to be the same that you apply to a single family dwelling unit, and as is the height. What it does say is a large city may not apply lower maximum height standards than those applicable to a single family dwelling, with the except maximum height may not be less than 25 feet or 2 stories. We're okay because our maximum height is between 30 and 35. So they'll just we'll apply the same height requirements that we apply to our single family dwellings. So here's parking. So let's see, the triplexes on lots of.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, Bill, you just took your hand down. I wasn't sure if you. Yeah, okay, there it is. Bill's got a question.
Okay.
I had a question about the density calculations. It's just sort of unclear. Maybe it's clearer to other folks, but do you pretend that these units don't exist and you only count the single family homes in looking at density calculations? Or I guess it's confusing. How do you just ignore them?
Well, what they're saying is you exempt them from density. So in a sense, you're ignoring them. You just aren't looking at density anymore when it comes to.
You don't even count it as one.
You're not even counting them as anything because you're not looking at density.
I
know it's odd.
But you are looking at density for all of the, say, single family homes that might be surrounding them.
Yeah, I mean, we still can. That's a question for the group. I mean, at some point you just aren't looking at density anymore. And it's rare if you're just doing a single family dwelling unit development on 4,000 square foot lots in the RS that they ever get close to meeting their maximums. Citywide, we're a lot lower than our maximum densities.
Okay.
But, yeah, I mean, it seems kind of odd to look at single family dwelling units when you're not looking at, today we don't even look at ADUs, duplexes, or triplexes. So the only thing that would change is we're not going to look at quads and townhomes and cottage clusters, basically everything. in the standard density residential district and the low density residential districts.
I think when we get to, I think it was townhomes later or something, they have a formula for dealing with density that also seemed kind of odd. It just seems like things are being treated in a somewhat unequal basis.
Yeah, I mean,
ought to eliminate the whole concept or something.
Yeah, basically, you know, to get the middle housing that the state wants in our cities, density does have to go away, and you almost look at zoning a little bit differently because you're going to have a mix of housing units in all zones. Right. Is the goal. Right.
Yeah, and I don't object. It just seems like we're getting to where there's sort of apples and oranges in the same basket.
Mm-hmm.
And Pauline, it looks like Jesse has a hand up too.
Okay. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Pauline. I might not be understanding this right, but in the cottage cluster, so there's no maximum density. The jurisdiction pre-existing density maximums do not apply. How does that work in conjunction with the lot size, though? Because there now is a minimum lot size.
So
cottage
we'll get to
shall meet the minimum lot size.
We'll get to cottage clusters in just a moment. And just to be clear, what is being proposed for cottage clusters is going to be a separate development alternative than what we have in the code today for cottage developments.
Gotcha. And do you know if it will replace that or?
No, I think we would keep both, and a developer has the option of which one they would like to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so parking. So basically for a triplex, if the lot or parcel is 3,000 square feet or less, you can require one space total. It's not one space per unit. It is one space total. And so that would apply probably in our RM districts. And I have a chart I'll show you on the next slide. For lots or parcels that are greater than 3,000 square feet, but less than 5,000 or equal to 5,000 square feet, you can do two spaces total. And I put RM there. I think that's really just RS. And then lots or parcels greater than 5,000, you can require three spaces. So that would be our low density residential because that's on 10,000 square foot lots. Quadplexes uses somewhat similar numbers. If you're 3,000 square feet or less, again, for a quad, it's one space total. If the lot is between 3 and 5, it's two spaces total. 5,000 to 7, you're at 3. And then over 7,000 square feet, it's 4 spaces. You're still allowed to count your on-street parking. The city currently allows up to 50% to count on street. You cannot require a garage or carport. If you do, it can count towards meeting their parking requirements as long as it meets the dimensions. You have to treat the parking requirements the same as a single family home, which basically means that the drive and parking has to be paved. And you may not apply additional minimum parking requirements to housing conversions, which we'll go over what that is.
And Jesse, did you have another question, or is that still left up from last time? Oh, okay, we're good.
Okay, so here's the chart that I put together. And again, these numbers may change, but I just thought to lay it out a little bit better. So on the left, you'll see the zones RL, RS, and RM. The first column, the 10,000, 4,000, and 2,500 is what's required for a single family home today in those zones. So for a duplex in the low density residential, it would be 10,000, RS4 and RM would be none. And then the parking would be 2 each, because in the duplex code, it says you can provide 2 parking spots. And then in the triplex, lot sizes be 10,000 in the RL, 5,000 in the standard density residential, and then no lot sizes in the for a triplex in the RM, because we don't today. And then based on those numbers dictates the parking requirements. So in the RL for a triplex, you're looking at 3 parking spots maximum. RS is 2, and then in the RM it would be 1. These are, and when I say maximum, this is the maximum that the city can require. If a developer wants to put in more parking, they definitely can, but these are the maximums that the city can require. And then for quads, the lot sizes in the RL would be 10,000 and the RS would be 7, and no lot size in the RM. And the parking is on the right, which is we can allow up to or require up to 4 in the RL, 3 parking spots in the standard density residential, and then 1 in the medium density residential districts. Any questions on parking?
Yep, we got, I didn't see who came in first, but I think it was Mike, if you still are interested. And then Sarah.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. Pauline, I've gone through most of the 9 meetings. I've looked at focus primarily on parking. I've looked at some of the comment letters. I'm curious. I see a lot of, I don't see consistency between all the people on the committee that they're all in favor of what is here in this document. So the question I have for you, as a city representative, do you feel comfortable to tell the council that this code is good, that you're okay with it, and they should not submit a letter saying, something's not right here? How do you feel?
I'd have to, what I need to do is compare it to our current parking requirements. Duplexes, I mean, basically 1 per unit seems fine. Even for triplex, 1 per unit. It's getting a little on the low side, but we do, again, these are just maximums. So a developer, and we have some developers on the phone today that would say that these might be what we can require, but they're definitely going to provide more parking than what's required because, one, they need to be able to rent or sell the units. So even though they're on the low side, I don't believe that someone's going to put 1 parking spot in for a triplex.
But should we allow the state to at least raise our hand? Shouldn't we object because it's clearly low? Or should we just kind of close our eyes, cover our ears, and hope for the best?
Lynn, do you have any input on that one?
Yeah, so Mike, I think that this is one that there were extensive groups collecting to discuss outside of the rack and tack meetings. Without a doubt, cities provided very strong feedback on this specific issue. And, ultimately, I think unless DLCD wants something different out of the bill, it is what it is. And so one way of looking at it, and this is less than ideal, but sometimes kind of how we have to get there, is I would say that very few people on the rack are truly pleased with the outcome of each component in the rules, right? We're kind of all equally angry about maybe different things. So some people tell us that that's the sign of a good compromise, right? Whether or not that's acceptable, I can't answer. I mean, to some degree, there's some trial. But I know League of Cities and Counties have both been involved in writing testimony. Parking took up probably 3 full meetings, and these are 3 or 4 hour meetings with endless testimony, commentary, back and forth. So my sense is we're never going to get to the place where people are all happy. My feeling is that frankly, we've pushed as much as we are going to be able to and still get listened to. We don't want to lose all credibility in continuing to push if the decision's more or less been made. But what we can do is evaluate how this is working once it's gone through and request tweaks in a future bill if that's needed to make it really a little bit more workable if this does truly mean, it's not going to work for cities. So, but there was also some very strong testimony from folks who had some pretty good citations, as well as some analyses provided through consultants that showed that parking beyond a very minimal level is a barrier to development. You can disagree with that, and that's appropriate, but I think that there are a couple sides to this. Initially, they were telling us that we could do no off-street parking, 0. And so it took a lot to even get to this point. So I don't know if that helps at all, but that's sort of how I'm looking at this. No, it's not perfect. There's other sections that probably Bend would change if it were all up to us, but I think the state frankly intends to have a pretty heavy hand in this. That was kind of the point of this bill. And so we need to do the best we can after all the testimony we've provided to try to make this work and then go back in a future session if we need to.
Well, I think there was definitely some compromise because some of the parking was proposed to be none, like no requirements. And cities definitely pushed back on that because there had to be some minimums that we can ask for. And after, like Lynn said, several meetings, this is what they ended up proposing.
I drive by a duplex on 9th Street just about every day, and I see 7 to 8 cars parked right next to this duplex. And I have taken a picture, and that picture will go to the commission because it makes absolutely no sense what they're saying. All communities are not the same. One size doesn't fit everybody's needs or demographics. You've probably heard that a time or two in your meetings you just referred to. So I'll shut up and let the next gal go.
Yeah, it looks like next gal is probably Kathy.
You know, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but right now, single family homes are allowed to have 5 unrelated people living in them. If every single family home did that, you'd have probably 5 cars. It is what exists now. I hear Bill, but I'm sorry, I'm going to be one of those people who thinks that this is the correct direction to go, and I support it.
And then it looks like Mike, I'm not sure if that's, oh, I keep losing your hand. I'm not sure if you have a new question or if that's left up from before.
There, it's lowered.
Thank you.
You all do a very good job. Thank you. So we'll keep moving on. We are doing good. We have an hour still to go. And we probably won't take the full hour, but so we'll just keep going. So we're still on triplexes and quads. Large cities are not required to apply a lot coverage or floor area ratio to triplexes and quadplexes, but we have the option, and we'll go into more detail with that when we meet on the 30th. But with the lot coverage, we currently already have lot coverage in the Bend Development Code. We may look at whether or not that's working and tweak what we have, as long as what we are applying to the triplexes and quadplexes is also consistent with how we treat single family dwelling units. And then floor area ratio, we need to look and see if we're even I think we can apply floor area ratio regardless if we apply things to single family. So it is a little bit different for triplexes and quads. If the large city chooses to apply the coverage or FAR standards, it can't be that less than established for a single family zone. So take back what I just said, that on the lot coverage, whatever we propose for triplexes and quads will have to be similar or identical to what we are proposing for single family. So there will be some work to do on lot coverage, and we'll have to talk about FAR if that's something we're even interested in. So any more questions on, not that you can't ask one later, but we're moving on to townhouses. So I just want to make sure if there's any other questions at the moment on the tris and quads, I can answer those. And if not, we'll move on to townhouses. All right. Okay, so townhouses, remember 2 lots, each 2 homes on their own lot attached by 1 common wall. And you have to allow at least 2 on together. So this is the lot size for townhouses. Basically, you don't have to apply any lot size if a city doesn't want to, which, you know, once you get this small, I don't know if it matters if you even have a lot size, more flexibility if you don't have one, or do we feel there should at least be a minimum? If we do choose to do a lot size for a townhouse, it cannot be greater than 1,500 square feet. You can have a little flexibility for corner lots and external lots and internal lots. So, you know, if there's 4 townhouses in a row, one's on a corner, one is internal to the site, you might play around with the lot sizes, but they still have to average 1,500 square feet. So we'll, as a committee, talk about what we want to see for the lot sizes for townhouses. Again, minimum street frontage, same thing. We don't have to necessarily apply a minimum street frontage. If we do, it cannot exceed 20 feet. Now, my personal thought is if you're as small as 20 feet, why even have a lot frontage? But maybe we still think there's a need for 20 feet, and we'll talk about that when we start drafting code. And they are also are saying that a city may allow frontage on public and private streets, as well as alleys or shared or common drives. So if you're familiar with our shared court development alternative in the development code, it allows townhouses to be on a shared court, which is basically a private access drive and a track. So this would comply with that. This is saying a city does not have to allow townhouses on a flag lot. We do today, so we can talk about that, but I don't see any issues with allowing it on a flag lot if a developer feels that that would be appropriate. The densities, this was brought up earlier. So if a city wants to apply density maximums in a zone, it has to allow 4 times the maximum density allowed for the single family detached dwelling in that zone, or up to 25 units per acre, whichever's less. So I did some math on that, and it looks like in our RL, low density residential district, you would have to allow 16 units per acre because the maximum density in the RL is 4 units per acre. 4 times that is 16. It's less than 25. Lots of math, but looks like you have to allow 16 units per acre in the RL. And then in the RS, because the maximum is 7.3, it actually exceeds 25. So you have to allow at least 25 units per acre in the RS district. Setbacks, similar to what we have in the code today. Obviously, when they're attached, there's 0 setbacks. And then you just have to apply the same setbacks that you do to single family for all the walls that are not attached to a townhouse. And the same height requirement as a single family detached. It's kind of funny that under height, they're actually tying it to parking. It says the city may not apply lower maximum heights to that of a single family home. And if a city requires off-street parking, the heights must allow construction of at least 3 stories. This is where I was talking to Brad, who had to leave the phone call in the beginning. He's with our building department, and I am just trying to figure out what 3 stories is. I know our base camp townhomes downtown are 3 stories. I need to pull the height on those. I believe they're probably 30, 35 feet. But again, if we are going to require parking, we have to allow a certain height for the townhomes. And then if we don't require parking, then it has to be 2 stories. Questions on this?
Yeah, it looks like Kathy.
Okay.
Yeah, Pauline, the way I read this is they're thinking there might be parking underneath so that you have 1 layer of parking and then 2 layers of housing above. Is that how you read it, or?
That's my guess on why they tied parking to the height. So base camp, if you're familiar with those townhouses, they have a garage on the 1st floor plus an ADU, and then 2 stories of livable space above that for a total of 3. But the parking is located on under the upper stories in a garage.
You know, they originally had flat roofs. I was wondering if that was to keep to a height, but then after the bad snowstorm, they switched to pitched roofs.
Yep.
So you do need to take that into consideration when you're looking at the height, you know, so. Okay, I'll shut up. Thank you.
Oh, no, you guys are fine. You don't have to shut up.
Small tidbit before we go on to the next question is that one of the developers, I think architect for that development, is an LCDC commissioner who was the primary liaison to this House Bill 2001 RAC. So she knows our code a little, is my guess.
Oh, yeah.
But then it's Bill's turn.
So Pauline, how does this relate to the proposed small dwelling unit developments where lot sizes could be as small as 1,500 square feet? And how is a townhouse different than what the Venn code refers to as single family attached?
So the first question, which is a good question, and the tax and the racks at the state level talked about it, because Bend is proposing the small dwelling unit developments, which is a single family detached dwelling on a 1,500 square foot lot. We were concerned because they were going to say that triplexes and quads have to be allowed on the same size lot as a single family. That took away a lot of flexibility from cities to do something different like the small lot developments, because then we would be looking at a 1,500 square foot lot that allows a single family would also have to allow the triplexes and quads. So that's where they came back as their original proposal, was to include the scaled lot sizes for triplexes and quads. So if you look at the language for the small dwelling unit developments, the only thing that is allowed on there is either a single family with an ADU or a duplex, because we still have to allow a duplex on every lot that allows a single family dwelling.
Is there any reason that you couldn't have a townhouse type development on the small dwelling unit lots?
You could, but under this code, you can do a townhouse as well because it's a 1,500 square foot lot.
Okay, and so the second question was, how does this relate to single family attached? Aren't they the same thing?
They are, yep. So we'll have to make sure our definition is basically the definition that the state's providing, which is 2 dwelling units attached by a common wall and a property line. I don't have it memorized, but they're saying the same thing, just differently. Good questions. Anybody else? All right, so parking. So we can require 1 parking space per unit. No more. Doesn't mean that someone's not going to provide a garage with 2 parking spots and a driveway in front with 2, but we can't require any more than 1. And as we just saw, if we require the 1, then we have to allow 3 stories. But I think we're okay there. I will definitely double check the base camp development, but I think we can get 3 stories in and also require 1 parking spot, which I assume is what the committee, and I could be wrong, but if this stakeholder group is interested in parking at least 1 per townhouse, then we'll double check the height. Still can count on-street parking up to 50% and same improvements. So basically paved parking, just like a single family dwelling. So bulk and scale, there are some design guidelines in the packet that we'll review on the 30th. We can choose to use those. We can look at lot coverage, floor area ratio, maximum unit size, and other standards that they've come up with that contribute to the bulk and scale of a townhouse. But remember, they just have to be clear and objective. And the minimum open space and landscaping requirements. Our code today for townhomes seems to work really well. We don't have an open space requirement. It's hard to imagine, and this is my personal opinion, but you have townhomes on such small lots that if you start saying, well, a percentage of that lot has to be dedicated towards open space or landscaping, then you're really losing the buildable area of that lot. The city may require it if they want to, but according to this, we do not have to require open space or landscaping requirements, which we don't today for the city of Bend. So it'd actually be more restrictive than what we already require. Any questions on those 2?
Pauline, this is Karna.
Hi, Karna.
What do we do about stormwater? So since you have to keep your stormwater on site, I guess you could have a tract, I guess, that does your stormwater?
I believe the city's going there, right? And then if they can't, then yeah, they'll still have to provide it on site. So maybe the driveway in the back is some permeable pavers, or I am no stormwater expert, but if it's to be required on site, that's one requirement, but it should be separate than saying that we require open space and landscaping.
Right, because a lot of times your stormwater spot is your open space. You know what I mean? Like, since you have to kind of provide for it.
Sure, and I think there's a townhome development by Polish going in, oh, I'm horrible, it might be oh, I don't know if it's on Butler Market Road. It's a combination, I believe, of apartments and townhomes. And I want to say they did something creative with the drainage there, but I'd have to double check.
So
But
Matt,
as our lots get smaller, I'm sure there's going to be more discussions on that.
so Matt has his hand up, and
Yeah,
he's
Matt's
Polish.
so he may be able to answer that.
Oh,
question.
good.
You can have an agreement between properties that allows stormwater to be treated. Let's say the end townhome might have a large open space, or you know, like it might, you don't have to, you're not forced to treat it all on your own site. And it's part of the properties though. I mean, you'll have to have that agreement written in, but yeah, there are ways around that.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You can do, we've done shared drainage easements, agreements and whatnot in the past. The other option is it's not saying that we can't treat it offset. You just have to offsite. You have to work that into the development and do storm laterals, pipe it to a tract, sort of like Karna was saying, or something of that sort.
Any other questions on the bulk and scale or open space and landscaping? All right, so now we're on to cottage clusters. So Jesse, again, this is going to be a new section in the code, the way I see it, and then we keep our cottage housing as a separate development alternative that a developer could choose to do if they wanted to.
Pauline, sorry. It looks like Lisa has her hand up as well.
Oh, okay.
Hi, yeah. Going back to the open space requirement, based on what we're hearing in other cities about how the heat is rising in these really populated areas, wouldn't we want to consider some open space requirements?
That will be, I mean, the stakeholder group can definitely, we can talk about that for sure if there's interest from the stakeholder group as a whole to propose some open space requirements. We don't have them today, so any townhome project, a typical townhome project that you see today and you drive by it wouldn't have an open space requirement.
So this is Karna again. I would be against that just because it would take away from the number of housing units you could actually provide, and that's the whole goal of this, is to actually provide an alternative housing amount. And I think Ben does a really good job. Well, the Ben Parks Rec has a lot of open space. So that's just my 2 cents.
One, for everybody, you know, keep this as one of those things for you to think about. And then as we start drafting code, we'll go into a little bit more detail and get everyone's opinions on this topic, as we will with all the areas where we actually have a say in, excuse me, as we draft the code. So just keep this one, you know, think about it. And then as we get into drafting code, this will come up again and we'll discuss whether or not it's appropriate. And if so, what that would look like for townhouses.
Kathy, did you have something different to add, or do you want to just hold the thought till we get back into open space later?
I'll hold that thought.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so cottage clusters. So this is definitely a little bit different than our cottage housing code. We are not required to apply a minimum lot or parcel size to a new cottage cluster, which is, again, 4 units on a lot. However, if a large city chooses to regulate minimum lot sizes, the following applies. So if the minimum lot or parcel size in the same zone for a detached single family dwelling is 7,000 square feet or less, which in our RS district, again, is 4,000, the minimum lot or parcel size for a cottage cluster may be up to 7. So basically, in our RS and RM, we can require 4 units to be on a 7,000 square foot lot. And then if the minimum lot or parcel in the same zone is greater than 7,000, so our low density residential, then it has to be allowed on the same size lot as a single family, which is 10,000 square feet. So we'll talk about it as a group, whether or not we want a lot size for cottage clusters. If so, then we'll look at the 7 and the 10,000 square foot lot sizes. Very flexible, large cities not required to apply minimum lot, parcel, or width to cottage clusters. If we do, it has to be the same as a single family dwelling unit. And drawing a blank on the width, I want to say it's 50. I'll have to double check, but we do have a minimum lot width, which seems to work fine for single family dwelling units. So we could pass that on to cottage clusters as well. Here's another that we cannot apply density maximums to the development of cottage clusters. I mean, they might as well say that because it doesn't pencil. So we'll exempt these out from meeting density as well. They just have to meet a minimum density of at least 4 units per acre. And then setbacks, same zone, same setbacks as your zone. I know one city's asking for clarity on what perimeter setbacks is, so I sent in the definition the city of Bend uses to help them, which basically says the perimeter is all the outside setbacks of the parent parcel. So for Bend, it would be 10 along the side and rear, or I'm sorry, 5 on the side and rears, 10 along the front, unless there's parking, it'd be 20. And then the height is a minimum of 1 story. I love how they use stories because we just don't define story. So we'll have to figure out what a minimum height is for a story. And then the unit size we've already talked about because it's in the definition, but it has a maximum building footprint of 900 square feet per unit. This was a little unfortunate, and we commented on the bill too, because if you want to do a single story that's 1,000 square foot unit, you can't. You can only do up to 900 square feet. You can make a 1,000 square foot 2-story unit because the footprint would still be 9, but you couldn't have larger single story structures, which meets a need in our community. And if you do, I guess in the case of these cottage clusters, the maximum building footprint would be 900 square feet if you chose to do single stories. Parking, no more than 1 off-street parking per unit. And that the parking can also be, let's see, may allow but may not require off-street parking. Oh, again, if you provide garages, it can count in there, but we can't require garages or carports. And you can count your on-street parking up to 50% like we do today.
Pauline, it looks like Jesse might have a question. And then just to remind folks who just jumped on, we are recording the meeting.
Yeah, hey Pauline, is it Jeremy from the city had told me that the Appendix Q is no longer available for building codes. So as far as lofts go in cottage clusters, I know in the micro apartment stuff that it talks about allowing for lofts. Is there any discussion of lofts in any of this?
You can do a loft in these. I don't know what building code you fall under, Jesse, but as long as the footprint is no more than 900. You're fine. There's not an actual maximum size limit on the dwelling units, just the footprint.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Jesse, you can still do the ladders up to the lofts and stuff. There's a new, they replaced that appendix with the small home code.
Okay, maybe I'll give you a call, Brad, to discuss that at some point.
Okay,
thanks.
That's up there.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, we talked about parking. City may not apply lot or parcel lot coverage or floor area standards. So won't even have to think about that because we can't. And nothing in this provision precludes them from allowing them on individual lots. So the TAC and the racks, a lot of cities are like, well, why are we saying 4 on 1 lot? And for a model code to be drafted in a way that works for every single city that would allow cottages on their individual lots got too cumbersome, because then you're talking about different setbacks and lot sizes, something different for every single city. So what they did is basically said that you can have 4 units on 1 lot, but they left it open. So if a city wants to allow these on individual lots, like we do under a cottage housing development, you can. So the design standards, again, not to be too repetitive, but we'll be going over on September 30th. And I sent those out for everyone to start reviewing. You're not required to apply the design standards. If you do, There's clear and objective examples in that packet that I sent out. And then you can also, as we've talked about, propose in addition to the clear and objective design standards an alternative design standard process for a developer. So this is if you choose not to even adopt the design standards or siting standards in these packets. And this is another one which we'll take to City Council or the subcommittee to see if there's interest. But I feel they're probably going to be okay with the design standards in the packet and the requirements that we've just gone over. But a large city may submit to the Department of Land Conservation Development findings and analysis demonstrating that the siting and design standards that were adopted prior to these rules. So let's say, this is my understanding too, but let's say, you know, we've adopted design and siting standards for duplexes and triplexes almost 2 years ago, and we wanted to continue to use those. We'd have to show that the city has applied this alternative standard and that our standards have achieved a 3% or greater production rate of the applicable middle housing type, so duplex, triplex, over the time frame during which city applied the standards and the standard or standards. And then it goes on. The time frame must include 2 years of housing production data and housing production data from the full time frame in which city applied the standards. I'm not going to go into this in detail. We'll ask the council if they're interested in keeping the design standards that we've already done in siting standards, or to move forward and adopt the model code one. I have to say the state has used a lot of our standards to begin with, so it's not a drastic change if we just did away with the ones that we have and moved into what the model code is requiring. And for simplicity for developers that build outside of the city of Bend, a lot of cities are going to end up with the same requirements, which is a little easier on a developer if, you know, our codes are similar when it comes to the design standards anyways. And then there's that other finding that you'd have to make, that the city applied the alternative standards, have sufficient quantity of remaining sites where we can accommodate middle housing to ensure 3% production rate over a 20-year horizon. This just seems like a lot to come up with to be able to use our existing design standards, which are very similar to what's in the model code. If a city wants to propose alternative siting and design standards, you go through a different process. You have to show findings that demonstrate that the standards will not individually or cumulatively cause unreasonable cost or delay of the middle housing. So you have to show the total time and construction cost of construction, including design, labor, and materials, the total cost of land, and it keeps going. Again, it seems like a lot of work when the proposed design standards in the model code are very similar to what we have today. The ones we have today seem to be working, and it'd be consistent with what the state is proposing. But we'll ask our city council subcommittee to make sure that they're okay with this group looking at the design standards in the draft model code to use.
And it looks like Matt has a hand up.
Hey, Pauline, I haven't spent a ton of time yet in the model design standards. Is there anything that's more restrictive than our City of Bend code?
I don't think so, but when we go on the 30th, I'll make sure that as we go through it, to highlight anything that I think is more restrictive, just like in the townhome discussion we had earlier, requiring open space is more restrictive than what we require today. We'll have that same discussion as we go through the design standards for sure.
Perfect.
Good question. So this is the middle housing conversion that's been mentioned throughout the code. Basically, you can do additions or conversion of an existing single family dwelling into middle housing. It has to be provided. It can't increase the nonconformance. So basically, if there's some nonconforming setbacks, whatever they do, can't increase that nonconforming setback. It has to comply with the code or what's there. And a couple other requirements, but in short, if you have a house and you want to convert it, this basically lets you convert it. You don't necessarily, I don't think, need to meet the design standards that we come up with because it may be impossible because the structure is already there. And that is it for this presentation. We did pretty good. The next meeting is September 30th. I've already sent out the design guidelines, but if you have any questions on them or you need clarity before the meeting or want to, just feel free to email me. That's fine. Make sure that you've accepted the meeting so you're able to attend on the 30th between 1 and 3. And then if you have any other questions for now, we have a half hour. I can answer anything.
Looks like Bill has a hand up.
Okay.
Yeah, I had two questions. One relates to the model code that we'll discuss the next time, but can a city essentially pick and choose some elements of it without adopting the entire thing?
Yes, yes. So a city can either adopt the entire model code, which we're not going to do because we already have a lot in our code. What we'll do is go through and review what is allowed as clear and objective standards. And if some of them we as a group don't feel are necessary, then we don't have to adopt those. Mm-hmm. Whatever we adopt just has to be in compliance with what is in there.
Okay. And the other sort of an observation, I guess, about the parking requirements, it seems to me that sort of like the density stuff, we're moving in the direction of a lot of inconsistency and frankly some unfairness. We already calculate parking based on the number of bedrooms in some cases, on a unit in other cases, 2 spaces for single family, 1 space for something else, half a space for something else. In these rules, they're adding calculating parking based on lot size, and yet none of this seems to me to have some sort of empirical foundation, or even a general guiding principle. So, for example, earlier today I looked up, according to the Census Bureau, the average number of vehicles per household in the United States is 1.9.
We have some information on that too, Bill, and Lynn, you might have to help me find that memo, but it breaks it down for Bend.
Yeah, well, that would be great to see. I guess what I'm driving at is all of these various methods seem arbitrary, and I mean, I don't expect that after the work that's been done here that these rules are suddenly going to change, but it would make more sense to me to say, every unit ought to have 1 off-street parking space with no credit at the curb, and if you have more vehicles than that, you need to, compete in the marketplace for space somewhere out there. But I just want to put that on the table. It just seems like, there are all these arbitrary formulas that have no grounding in any sort of factual or empirical basis. And I don't know what the process would be for pushing back on that, but both as a city and as a state, it seems like there ought to be, an effort to come up with an approach that's a little bit fairer. That's my soapbox for the day.
Well, and I'll send you, following the meeting, that email that was sent out from DLCD today that gives you the contact information and how to submit public comments. And I encourage you to submit a public comment to them regarding your concerns about parking. And we'll send out that memo that included Bend, if I remember correctly, the typical household size and parking based on whether you're a renter or a homeowner and what type of unit you're renting or owning, for you to take a look at that. And then again, back to what Lynn and I were saying, it is hard when you have a state writing a parking code that has to apply to every city that is 25,000 or greater in population. All our codes are probably very different when it comes to how you calculate parking and how much parking is required for duplexes and triplexes. So I think they did what they could, but it is going to be probably an amendment for a lot of cities to change it. And you're right, since now we are going to be looking at parking based on lot sizes, maybe we look at the parking requirements for some of our other residential uses. I don't like using parking based on bedrooms because it's hard to define a bedroom. I do like parking based on units. That is very clear. This is basing parking more on the, well, unit and lot size. But it's something for us to look at and see if there's some cleanup we need to do in our parking table for residential uses so that it's kind of using the same standards.
And then it looks like we have Mike and then Karna with additional questions.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll try to be short. As a neighborhood association land use rep, we are working with the NLA to try to fulfill the council's suggestion that we educate citizens that what about land use, that there is a process, and here's the story. When we all showed up at the Evergreen Apartments project, late in the meeting, an architect stood up and said, guys, you're late. If you have a problem with the parking, it is minimal. They're just doing it by code. Your real beef should have been with the council when they approved the parking rate. And so we're getting them a little smarter that they have to look at code type 4 applications, that's where they might have a chance to, as the statewide goal number 1 says, have an influence in their city's planning. Now what I'm hearing, basically, guess what? It's now being taken away. They really can't go to their city council and complain about this, that the city has tied your hands. So the question I'm going to hear, so I'm just looking for an answer if you could. What do I tell these citizens? What kind of recourse do they have? Did the city mess up because we weren't notified that this was coming down the road? Or did the state drop the ball and not give the city a chance, citizens a chance to comment on this? So you got an answer that I can use with the citizens?
I would encourage them to submit letters and comments during the public process for the state's code that they're proposing. And you can forward on the email that I'm sending you with the contact information so that they can participate in that public process.
Were you asked, well, who was supposed to notify us? I mean, this is kind of an anomaly. We're showing that just because we're here, you're getting ready to change your code. We weren't notified that all that work was going on. So it's kind of the cart, we're kind of behind. Did somebody drop the ball in not providing a notification to the citizens? Because now we have, you know what, till, well, September is the one that's really important. If you wait till November 12th, 13th, those guys aren't going to wade through a whole bunch of last minute letters. Now
well, I would ask that question of the Department of Land Conservation and Development since it's their process.
Okay. I was just hoping you'd have a great suggestion and we'll run with that.
Any other questions?
So,
oh, Karna, yes, sorry.
It's okay. I kind of have somewhat of an answer on the parking issue. The state wants to reduce vehicle miles traveled. And so the thought, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, is that if we reduced your parking, that maybe you'll get rid of a vehicle. So it's a statewide policy. There's not a lot of influence we have, even as citizens, to change that. What Pauline is describing is the result of practically a year-long statewide process involving technical advisory committees from all over the state, as well as citizen community members as part of a appointed committee that came up with this information. And I do want to commend Pauline's extremely hard work in participating in the technical advisory committee and making sure that Ben's already present code could be incorporated in the statewide code, that we had a lot of influence in making sure that we didn't have to make a lot of changes. So that was extremely helpful. There probably wasn't anything we could have done about the parking. That's a statewide policy that none of us really have influence on, except, as Pauline said, you can comment directly to LCDC. But that's something the train may have already left station on. That's my 2 cents.
Well, and I think we did, our best when it came to my participation and Lynn's being on the rack when it came to parking, because one of their proposals was just requiring no parking. And cities definitely pushed back on the no. So we made some progress in getting some minimal parking requirements. May not be ideal compared to what some cities may think they need, but it's better than saying that cities can't require any parking. Any other comments?
I have my hand up again.
Oh, okay, sorry, I just can't see the hands for some reason.
I understand. My eyes are bloodshot because I've spent several days going through every one of those meetings, minutes, and materials, including all those great consultants. I was really surprised that we've gone this far with parking requirements. When I saw what was submitted, there was a survey of car ownership. What do you think the car ownership is in Bend? The people
I don't know
who
that off the top of my head.
10%. This comes from a letter from a Portland company who are very strong advocates for, little parking. They did the survey of Bend and several others. 10% of our people or renters don't have cars. 50% have more than one car. You do the math. Where are all those people going to park on our streets that are very narrow? Now, I know you've told me what to do, and we'll put it in the letter. We're going to copy you. But to me, these meetings, I went through all those notes. My gosh, and it's a cast of thousands, it seems like. But my concern is there were comments that were just taken and ignored or not checking the math of consultants. And we'll put it in the letter and let you take a look. But there's something in there that you may want to, city might want to give us an opinion on. Are we off our rockers? Thank you.
Thank you.
And you've done a heck of a job too.
Any other comments there? Okay.
Sorry, Pauline, it looks like Sarah just got a hand up too.
Oh, okay, Sarah.
I just wanted to come on and say that I second everything that Mike said. He's really speaking my truth as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would encourage those who share Mike's opinion, if you to submit your comments to the state, and I'll send you the notice so that you are added to it. And then I believe you get on a list too, so you'll get other notifications and you won't have to rely on myself to send them to you, and participate in the state's process. And then as we move forward, we could talk a little bit about parking, about whether or not we want to continue to allow the requirement on street like we have today, which is 50% or not. That is something that this committee can address with parking. What we can't address, as we know, is the actual parking requirement per unit. But we'll get there. We will have several meetings, I'm sure, to go over what our proposal will be for our amendments. Again, our next meeting is on the 30th, and we will just go through like we did today. I'll have a presentation and we'll go through what we're allowed to do for clear and objective design guidelines. And following that, then we will start looking at the draft. But I'd like to see the state's process, make sure that we're not jumping the gun too fast, but we'll figure out our schedule quickly. And again, in the meantime, if you have questions or anything, please give me an email or a phone call and we can chat. And thank you so much for your time today. I know it's kind of a dry subject, although I really enjoy it. Some of you might find it a little bit dry, but it was a good discussion, great questions. So I appreciate your time, and then we'll talk to you on the 30th. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Pauline.
Thanks, Pauline. This is Jenna. I was only on for the last bit here, but I appreciate all the conversation.
Oh, good. Glad you got to join a little bit.
Yeah, and I was looking while I have you. Do we have notes from these meetings?
Notes from this meeting?
Hmm?
Is that, so we did record it. So there will be a recording available if you want to listen to it. And then Andrina in our department thought maybe a transcript could be put together based on the recording. So if that's the case, those will be available too.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's probably more than I need. And then for past meetings, do we have any notes from those, from the like one in January and February?
I just have the recordings.
We recorded those?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I have a little tiny recording that was in there.
Yeah, that was a lot of discussion. I was just trying to remember for the council work session discussion tonight if there were any like key points that I wanted to make sure. But I know that we talked, at length about parking and I was trying to remember. I think we did also talk about kind of potential location. Yeah, allowed zoning district. That was the first thing we talked about. So those are really the two big items.
Yeah, and if you want to give me a call outside of this,
sure.
Just give me a call. I'm available now till the council meeting. So just give me a call and I can go over with you the meetings we had. I don't have notes. Well, if I do, they're in my office, but we can brainstorm together and I can help you out.
Okay, sounds good. I'll give you a call right now.
Okay, perfect.
Bye.
Thank you.
Pauline, I sent the feasibility memo from ECO back at you. I found that while we were but I was looking for an additional more parking info. I haven't found it yet, but if I do, I'll send it your way. If you happen upon it, let me know so that I stop looking.
Okay, yeah, no, I'll see the one that you sent me. I have one that I can visually see. So it might be what you found. For some reason, it seemed like there was one or two memos, at least one for sure.
That's what I was thinking too. So I'm going to keep looking, but definitely let me know if you find it also.
Okay, and thank you for your help when parking was discussed.
Good job. That's not easy ever.
No, and thank you for seeing the hands because I don't know why I can't see them, but just can't.
No problem. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.